Today we're going to learn a special technique from Phaladipika. This technique is also given elsewhere, and off the top of my head I can't remember if it's exactly identical as the way that he describes it in Phaladipika. But in any case, this is an important technique in Indian astrology for figuring out if a person is fertile or how fertile a person is. And you would use this technique on both people in the relationship, like both people that are trying to make a baby. And you can get a combined fertility for the two of them. So this is helpful for a couple of reasons. First of all, just to kind of plan out your expectations. But second of all, if you want to isolate how to improve the fertility, this would be useful because it's like a diagnostic tool where you could see where the difficulties would lie. So let's start. This is again in chapter 12, which is all about childbirth. And it's the 14th text. So here's what he says. Jivandu kshitajas putaikya bhavane yugme cha yugmangshike strinam kitre balam vadanti sutadam mishre prayasat phalam Bhasvach Chukra Guru Sputaikya Bhavane Pyojangshake Pyojabe Pungsang Bija Balam Sutta Pradamimam Mishre to Mishram Vadet. Here's what it means. First words he says is Jiva, Indu, and Kshitija. Jiva is Jupiter. Indu is moon. And Kshitija is Mars, same word as Kuja, earthborn, volcanic. That's the name for Mars. Sputa. Sputa is an important word in astrology. It means the exact position. So it generally refers to the degree. So for example, most people who dabble to whatever extent in Vedic astrology don't do the aspects correctly. They say things like Jupiter aspects the 5th house and the 7th house and the 9th house, which is very, very, very cursory shorthand version of the correct system of aspects. The correct system is called Sputa Drishti. Sputa meaning it concerns the exact position, not just what sign it's in, but what degree is it at and what's the degree-based relationships with other planets. So that's the meaning of the word sputa, the exact position. So then finally he says, Jivan dukshitija sputeka bhavane. Eka bhavane means reduce everything to one. So in other words, it means sum it all up. So what he's saying is sum the positions of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. Take the position of Jupiter, add it to the position of the Moon, and add that sum to the position of Mars, and you get this thing that's another point. It's like a lot of fortune, a lot of this or that, it's a lot, or it's like a calculated point. And this we can call this the fertility point. Sputa bijam, maybe they call it natively. Now he continues, Yugmecha yugmangshake. Yug means in groups of two, so it means even numbers. So it means sign number 2, sign number 4, sign number 6, sign number 8, sign number 10, sign number 12. So it means the female signs, Taurus, Cancer, Virgo, etc. So yugme cha yugma angshake. If it's in female or even signs and the amshas. If what is in female signs and amshas, this point, this fertility point that you calculated, by adding the positions of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. If that point falls in female signs and amshas, strinam, for the women, kshetre balam. Kshetre balam means fertility, but it's female fertility. It means strength, or bala, in the kshetra, which means field. Field is the womb. The analogy of conception is planting a seed in the field, because in the field, then that planted seed grows. So in that analogy, the man plants the seed, and the field is the womb. So if women have this calculated fertility point in female signs and female amshas, then their field is fertile. It's good dirt. They say Vedanti. People say this. So he's saying Vedanti means this is a technique that's well known. He didn't invent this technique himself. Sutadam, and that Kshetra Balam can give Sutta. It's strong for what? It's strong for giving kids. Mishre, if it's mixed, if what's mixed? If the point that you calculated, if the sum of the positions of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars, if they fall in a mixture of male and female signs and amshas, then prayasat palam, the fruit, the crop, the child, comes after prayasa. Prayasa means making an effort. So it takes a little struggle. So what he's saying here is, sum the positions of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. If this sum falls in female signs and amsha, they say a woman has a fertile field. If it's mixed, then producing children requires more significant effort. So that's the first two lines. Jivenduk shitajas putaikya bhavane yugme cha yugmangshake strinam kshetre balam vadanti sutadam mishre prayashat palam. The next two lines, bhasvach chukra guru sputaikya bhavane ojangshake ojhabe pungsang bija balam sutam pradam imam mishre to mishram vadet. So now he says, take Bhasva, the sun, Shukra, Venus, and Guru, Jupiter. Take their sputa, their exact position, and ekabhavane, reduce it into one thing. Sum it all up together. So for the man, we're taking the position of Jupiter, Sun, and Venus. For the female, we're taking the position of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. I'll talk about that, why these planets, in a second. Api oja angshake, api ojabhe. If they're in oja means odd. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sag. Those are the male signs. If the male fertility point falls in the male signs and male navamshas, then that pungsa, that man, has bija balam. Bija balam again means fertility, but it's male fertility. Bija balam means powerful seed. Women's fertility is kshetra bala, powerful field. Male fertility is powerful seed. If you put a good seed in a good field, you get a great crop. Very easily. If you put a weak seed in a strong field, you could still get a crop. If you put a strong seed in a weak field, you could still get a crop. If you put a weak seed in a weak field, you might not always get the crop out of it. And if you put a very weak seed in a very weak field, you might never get a crop. That's the idea. That's the technique, basically, of how we'll combine all these things. And again, he says, Mishre tu Mishram Vedet. If it's mixed, then it's mixed. So it's just an exact analog for men and women, except that we're doing different planets and asking for the result to be different. For female, the planets are Jupiter, Moon, and Mars, summed up together, where that sum makes a point called a fertility point. If that point is in female signs and female amshas, for the female, then her femininity is strong. Her field is strong. For male, Jupiter, Sun, Venus. Sum up those points. If that point, fertility point, lands in male signs and male amshas, then the male is strong in male fertility, which is Bijapalam. If it's mixed, then it's mixed. And if it's nothing, then it's nothing. You understand? And you should understand. It's not too hard to understand, but actually it's a little complicated to do it. So let's talk about how to actually do this. Oh, we also want to talk about why, right? Why are these particular planets involved? So there's actually two or three things that are very, very interesting. One is very obvious. The obvious thing is the synchronicity of femininity and masculinity. Synchronicity of things makes them strong. This is the basic principle which you should really not be overlooking. And this is the principle you can carry into any kind of interpretation, any kind of astrological work, is that the synchronicity of things is what makes things strong. Male native, male signs, male amshas, synchronicity of maleness. Female native, female signs, female amshas, synchronicity of feminineness. Mixtures of that, mixtures of results. Contradictions of that, contradicted result. That's one thing that's easy to take away from this principle. The other thing that's more unusual is these concepts of like the lot of fortune and these calculated points, the Brigu Bindu and these types of things. This is kind of a new concept as far as our live stream has gone. This is, I believe, the first time that he's presented this type of a point. You see, in astrology, you don't need to bring in asteroids and outer planets and all that stuff. There's so many points that are derived just from the 7 planets. And you haven't even exhausted them yet, and you don't even know about them. But you think there's not enough points. So this is an example of a point that's in Vedic astrology. It's based on the planets. It's not a planet, but it's another point in the chart. Now let's talk about the third thing. So that's the two of the three interesting things about this technique is one of it is just shows how synchronicity works. The second thing is it introduces this concept of summing up positions of planets to determine another point. Sometimes some points would be all summed. Some points in astrology are midpoints between other things, averages of other things. There's different ways of taking different points. And the third thing that's interesting is the planets that impact fertility. And we have seen this before in other techniques in this chapter. It's consistent. For both, so think about the planets which are mentioned. For the female, it's Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. And for the male, it's Jupiter, Sun, and Venus. Well, one thing that's easy to see is that they both have Jupiter on the list. Because Jupiter represents reproduction, growth, fertility, babies, parenting. So Jupiter is essential for both the male or female if the subject is childbirth, fertility. But the other two planets, you should be able to see another kind of relationship between them. Let me mention what the other two planets are. For the female, it's Moon and Mars. For the male, it's Sun and Venus. So you should be able to see that these are opposites. But there is one confusing thing. So in other words, you should be able to see that the moon on one side, the sun on the other. The moon for the female, the sun for the male. And that should make easy sense. Because the sun is very male. So here's again synchronicity of maleness. And the moon is very female. But the other one is Mars and Venus, which also makes sense because Mars is extremely male and Venus is extremely female. But the positions that we might expect them in is reversed. And this is consistent. We've seen this in other techniques presented in this chapter as well. Male for one, Mars for one, Venus for the other, it's fairly obvious. Sorry, male for one, female for the other is fairly obvious. So you might expect the female planets to add up to find the fertility point would be Jupiter, Moon, and Venus. And the male planets to add up to find the male fertility point would be Jupiter, Sun, and Mars. But the Venus and Mars switch places. So that the woman's fertility point is Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. And the male fertility point is Jupiter, Sun, and Venus. Why is that? Well, for the Sun and Moon, it's not just the synchronicity of masculinity and femininity which is at work. It's that the Sun represents the father, and we're talking about the ability to be a father. And that is important for the male. And the Moon represents the mother. It's not just femininity in general, but it's the mother. And so we're talking about the ability to become a mother. Here, we're talking about the ability to become a father or to become a mother. So the Moon is for the female, the ability to become a mother, and the Sun is for the male, the ability to become a father. But with Mars and Venus, what we're talking about is the male's ability to give the seed and the woman's ability to be planted. Think about it. When you put a seed in the earth, what do? You have to make a hole in the earth. You have to dig the earth and put the seed in it. So that is a martial thing. Why do you think Mars is represented by a circle with an arrow? Because Mars punctures things. Mars goes inside things. Now, you might think that we want to see the man's ability to penetrate. But we don't. We want to see the man's ability to give. This is why Venus represents the giving of semen. Shukra is another word for semen. The fluid that ignites life. So we want to see the power of the man's bijam. So we're going to look at Venus, not Mars. And how well he can interact with the female. And similarly for the female, we want to see her ability to take it in, to take in the seed and house it. So we want to see how she responds with Mars and how she responds with males. So because fertility requires the combination of male and female elements, it's not strictly all the female planets are on the woman's side and all the male planets are on the male side. The mother planet is on the female side, the father planet is on the male side, but then the life-giving planet is on the male side. And the ability to be fertilized is on the female side. So that's Venus and Mars. Perhaps it makes no sense to you. Perhaps it's not right. But perhaps my explanation is not the best in the world. But this is the technique. And we're just trying to understand the technique. And it's not like, maybe this is weird. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe this is a typo. Because consistently, we've seen it. I believe. I could review this. But consistently in the 12th chapter, we saw that combo of Moon and Mars for the female, Sun and Venus for the male, Jupiter for both. Okay. You guys are asking, Crystal is asking, what about Ketu and Barney? Joe Rowe is asking, Venus and Ketu in the 5th house or the 6th house? See, why don't you pay attention to the topic being discussed? Then you'll learn. But if you are asking questions that have nothing to do with the topic being discussed, then you're not benefiting from the topic being discussed. What you're asking about is a good thing to ask about, but at the wrong time. What you're asking about are other things about fertility that's not included in this technique. But why ask about it now? Now where it's time to learn a technique. So I do want to mention the points though, because it is also important. This technique doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's other things that indicate fertility and non-fertility. But try to set aside the questions that you already have and try to learn something which is being taught. And then maybe that will alleviate and answer your questions already and automatically when you have that approach. Jonathan asks, is it Venus for the male because it symbolizes semen and Mars for the female because of menstruation's relationship to fertility? That can also be it. Nomadic Sun. And Briyat Jataka said that Moon and Mars are night planets. And Sun and Venus are day planets. That's interesting. Okay. So let me read this one more time and then we'll go look at how you actually calculate it out in a chart, because that is important for you to know. Sum the positions of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. If this sum falls in female signs, it can't be signs, right? It shouldn't be plural. If this sum falls in a female sign in Amsha, they say a woman has a fertile field. If mixed, producing children requires more significant effort. Then sum the positions of Jupiter, Sun, and Venus. If this sum falls in male signs and Amsha, if this sum falls in a male sign and Amsha, they say a man has fertile seed to give pregnancy. If it is mixed, so is his fertility. Now, let's check it out. Hi, Anthony. Thank you. Now, here's a female chart. So for female chart, we need to know Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. So here's the positions of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars. So Jupiter is in Aries at 24 degrees, 29 minutes, and 50 seconds. Do you have to include the minutes and the seconds? You don't have to. But since we're going to look at the Amsha also, it's a good idea. Because Amshas are fairly small, 3 degrees, 20 minutes each. So you might not need to include the seconds if you're doing everything by pencil and paper and you don't feel like having an extra multiply by 60 thing. But you do at least need to use the minutes position and certainly degrees. So you'll need the sign, degree, minute, and probably the second of these 3 planets. So Jupiter is in the first sign at 24 degrees, 29 minutes, 50 seconds. The moon in this chart, first sign, 17 degrees, 41 minutes, 42 seconds. And Mars, the third sign, Gemini, at 6 degrees, 41 minutes, 10 seconds. So we need to add these together. But adding them together, what would be easier? Maybe the way I did it is actually more complicated. Let me see if you can do this. What's 42 plus 50? You say it's 92, right? But there's 60 seconds in a minute, not 100. So it's 32 and 1 minute. If that might be comfortable, that might actually be less work. Mathematically, it's political season in Japan. It's so annoying. These people think they're earning your vote, but they're just earning your hatred. So it might be easier to add it up that way. If you want, I'll show you the way that I did it. In other words, you can just say, okay, 42 degrees plus 50 degrees is 1 minute and 32 seconds. So then 29 degrees plus 41 degrees is 70 minutes, plus the 1 extra minute, 71 minutes. So it's 11 minutes and 1 degree. 1 degree plus 17 is 18, plus 24 is what? 42. That's actually 1 whole sign and 12 minutes. So you can say that the sum of Jupiter and Moon is, I already forgot the numbers, but it's in the next sign, Taurus, by such and such. If you write it down on paper, you'd get it. Let me show you how another way to do it. What you can also do is you can just translate everything into seconds and then just add up the seconds in a base 10, regular way of adding. So since Jupiter is at in the first sign, that's nothing is added. It's because remember, Aries is actually, when you say how many signs, you're saying how many signs have been completed. So saying that Jupiter is in Aries means it hasn't gone through any zodiac sign from the beginning. It's still in the first one. So we're not going to add 30 degrees at all. So that contributes nothing. And it's at 24 degrees of that sign. So on one way to do the math, especially if you have a computer, this is easy, maybe. You just multiply 24 by 60 to find out how many minutes, and then you multiply that by 60 to find out how many seconds. How many seconds is in 24 degrees? 86,400. And then you could do the same with the minutes. 29 minutes, you multiply by 60, 1,740, and then it's got 50 seconds, and then you can just add up that right column. And you can realize that Aries, 24 degrees, 29 minutes, and 50 seconds is 88,190 seconds into the zodiac. So now you have a nice decimal number representing Jupiter's position. However you want to do the adding, whatever is easier for you. You do the same thing for the other two planets involved. And you then, all you have to do is sum up those colorful cells. You sum up 88,000, 63,000, and 240,000. And you find out that it's 391,962 zodiac seconds. That's the fertility point is located at that spot for this woman, for the sample chart. But what does that mean? 391,000 zodiac seconds. We're certainly not used to talking about zodiac seconds. So all you have to do is divide it out again. So what it means is it's in the fourth sign at 18 degrees, 52 minutes, and 42 seconds. And the way you figure that out is you just divide it by 30. Is that what you do? Hang on a second. How do I get this number? Oh, no. Sorry, just a second. Boom, boom, boom. Divide by 30 times 60 times 60. And that will tell you what sign it's in. Okay, so then that's how you get that number 3.6, blah, 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 blah. So that means that it's completed. This fertility thing has completed 3 signs, so it's in the fourth sign. And then it has 0.6 something distance into that sign. So you convert that into degrees by dividing that by 60 times 60. And it'll tell you that means is that it's completed 18 degrees, and then it has 0.87 into that current degree. And you multiply that by 60, and you get 52 minutes, and you have a little left over. You multiply by 60 again, you get how many seconds. That's how you do the math. This way might be more complicated than the simple way of adding up and knowing what you're adding. Well, however you like to do it, you add the 3 points together, and you figure out where the fertility point is. But, so this means it's in Cancer. Her fertility point is in Cancer at 18 degrees, 52 minutes, 42 seconds. But, so that sounds good because Cancer is a female sign. So it looks good for this woman that she's fertile. But we also need to know the navamsha of the fertility point, because it's a combination of the Rashi and the navamsha should both be female for a woman. So how do you figure out the navamsha? You should already know that, but to remind you, it's just all you have to do is divide the degrees. There, I put the fertility point on the chart. So here, this planet is at 18 degrees and 52 minutes, right? So just convert that all to minutes. Just multiply the degrees by 60 and add 52 to it. And then how big is every navamsha? It's 3 degrees and 20 minutes. What's 3 times 60 is 180. So 3 degrees is 180 minutes, plus another 20 minutes. Every navamsha is 200 minutes of arc. So now if you can, again, this might be more complicated than it needs to be. If this is actually the simplest way to do it, but if you're not used to math, it might be less complicated than just trying to figure out what's 18 divided by 3.2. But you might want to be exact. You can kind of guesstimate that 3.2, every three of them is 10 degrees. So it must be past the third navamsha and the fourth navamsha, but it probably is not yet gotten to the sixth navamsha, because then it would have to be at 20 degrees or higher. So it's probably in the fifth navamsha. You can just guesstimate that by looking at the value of 18 degrees. Or you can go ahead and calculate it. You can calculate the minutes of the planet's position in the sign by the minutes per navamsha. And you can find out that it's actually 5.66 navamshas. So in other words, it's 66% through the fifth navamsha. So now it's in the fifth navamsha of Cancer. You just need to either consult a chart or know your theory. Cancer is a cardinal sign. So therefore, the first navamsha of Cancer is Cancer. For any cardinal sign, the first navamsha is the same as the sign. So then you just need to count 5 from Cancer. Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Libra, and then the fifth one is Scorpio. So this woman's fertility point is in Cancer in the fifth navamsha, which means it's in the Scorpio amsha of Cancer. Scorpio is a female sign. So this woman has her fertility point is in a female sign and a female amsha, and that, according to this technique, means she has very high fertility. Kshetram balam. Her field is very fertile. And indeed, this woman is practically a magician with babies. This woman has a baby when she wants, whenever she wants. And the birth is like, there are other issues with the babies and things like that. It's not that just because you're fertile, you have an easy life and an easy motherhood, and that your children grow up to be doctors and lawyers and bankers. But her fertility is mystical. You can see other things, like people ask, well, what if I have Ketu in Bharani, or what if I have Venus and Ketu in the 6th house, etc.? Well, what if you have the 5th lord in the 12th house, like this woman does? Surely, not everything is positive. In fact, she also has Saturn near her fertility point. Not everything is positive, but here, with this technique, we analyze the fertility of the woman. And the fertility is very strong for this woman. Now, she can't, no matter how strong your fertility is, whether you're male or female, you can't make a baby by yourself. Like even Kunti had to call by mantra men from the heavens to make a baby. I mean, how many, can a mystical person make a child? Draupadi and Drishtadyumna, born from mantra, from a fire. But unless you're some kind of really, really advanced wizardish yogi, you can't make a baby by yourself. So I think that goes for 100% of us. And that means that no matter how strong your fertility point is, you need to have a partner who's also got a strong fertility point. So we need to see the fertility of this woman's partner to tell. But if you have a very strong farm, then even if you have weak seeds, you can probably still grow most of the crops most of the time. The best combination is strong seeds and a strong farm. But the other combinations also work sometimes. That's why he says prayatpalam. You can get the crop, but it takes a little bit more work. But when both of them are weak, then it doesn't work at all. Samurai says, sorry, I didn't get why it's Cancer. Do you count the degrees from the latest sign? Okay, let's try to do this in a way that you can follow along. You could also try to do all the math as shown on the screen, but let's start with the moon. As you can see, it's at 17 degrees. Let's just do it very basic, right? The moon is at 17 degrees. Add to that the position of Jupiter. Jupiter's at 24. So add 17 and 24. You get 41. 41 degrees in the zodiac is where? It's in Taurus, isn't it? The first 30 degrees of the zodiac is Aries. 41 is 11 degrees Taurus. So this fertility point is at 11 degrees Taurus without adding Mars. Now add Mars. Mars is in Gemini. That means it's completed Aries, all 30 degrees of Aries, all 30 degrees of Taurus, plus it's 6 degrees into Gemini. So it's at 66 degrees. So previously we had 41 degrees. So far without Mars, the fertility point is at 41 degrees. Now add 66. 41 and 66 is 107. That's a nice number. It's 107. So her fertility point, roughly, not including the minutes and seconds, is at 177 degrees of the zodiac. Where is 107 degrees? It's past 90, right? 30, 60, 90. So it's completed the third sign. It's in the fourth sign. 107 minus 90 is 17 degrees. So it's 17 degrees into the fourth sign. That's how you do the calculation really quickly, basically, right? You see, when we got calculated, we actually found it was at 18 degrees, 52 minutes and 42 seconds. Why? Because we have to add in the minutes and seconds. So that'll add another extra degree. Does that make sense now? Yes, Mataji. So that's how you can do it. You can also do it, even you can include the minutes and the seconds, also doing it in that same way. Now let's look at the male's position. These are the planets that we need to know for the male. The Sun, Venus, and Jupiter. So this is a more difficult example to show because they're further away from Aries. This is just bigger numbers. But this is the positions when you figure them all out. And when you add them all together, it's at 1,799 seconds. And when you do all the math on 1,799 seconds, you find out that means it's in the fifth sign at 19 degrees, 45 minutes, 36 seconds. So I put it on the chart. You can see where it is. It will go around. So if it passes Pisces, it comes back to Aries. 1 million seconds is more than the amount of seconds that's in the zodiac. But that when it pushes past the end of the zodiac, it goes back to Aries. So it winds up in Leo. So now we need to find out the Amsha. What navamsha is at 19 degrees of Leo. Again, it's pretty much in the middle of the sign, right? 19 to 15 is the middle. So it's pretty much somewhere in between. It's pretty much in the middle of 1 and 9, which is 5. So you could just guesstimate that it's probably in the fifth navamsha, but that's not very helpful because you need to know exactly. So you can do another quick thing and you can say, well, every 3 navamshas is 10 degrees. So we have these cutoffs of 10, 20, and 30 for 3, 6, and 9 navamshas. And I can see that this fertility point, 19 degrees and 45 minutes, must be right before the beginning of the 6th navamsha. So it's in the 5th. That's how you do it by what we call intuition, which is just fast math without paper. This is how you do it on paper. I know the thing is too small, but you can zoom in or something. You just say this planet is at 19 degrees and 45 minutes, right? So just multiply 19 by 60, and then add it to 45, and then divide that by 200, because there's 200 minutes in every nakshatra, and you find out it's 5.9. Navamsha. You find out it's 5.9 navamshas. So it's in the fifth navamsha. So then you need to know the fifth navamsha of Leo. It's a fixed sign. Cardinal signs, they start from themselves. Fixed signs have themselves, the Vargotam is right in the middle, it's in the fifth sign. And dual signs have the Vargotam at the end. This is the last sign. That's how you can keep it in your head. You don't need to consult the chart. So we can know that this is in Leo Navamsha. And there it is. Here it is actually shown out. Leo, the first Navamsha is Aries, second is Taurus, third is Gemini, fourth is Cancer, and fifth is Leo. So what does that mean? Well, this fellow has got his fertility point in a male sign and a male amsha. Very high fertility of the seed. The seed fertility is very strong. Now, if this person would happen to make a baby, attempt to make a baby with that woman, what would be the expected result? You probably get a baby immediately. Because this is how you would sum it up. The male's fertility point has the right sign gender and the right amsha gender. So that's 2 points out of 2 possible for the male. The male is 100% fertile. The female has the right sign gender and the right amsha gender for her. So that's also 2 points for her out of 2. That's another 100%. So the total is 4. So this couple is 100% fertile. That means they can make babies anytime they want. That's the prediction. And that is the reality. If you have situations like this, like, oops. What does this look like at the moment? It looks pretty god-awful. If you have situations like this, my goodness. Well, you know what? I'm not going to be aesthetically pleasing right now. If you have, you might have somebody without this, right? Oh, I didn't do this right. I didn't expect to do it like that. I didn't actually do the math. Let me do the math for you now. Okay, and then this equals and that should be as a percent so that you can appreciate it. Okay, so now you can see, like, let's say the female was missing 1 point. Then you can see that this couple has a 75% fertility as a couple, which means also they're probably not coming to you to say, how come we can't have babies? Because 75% fertility is still pretty high. Probably the kind of, and let me just illustrate this too. Even if you have this, you still have 50% fertility. So this doesn't mean that just because you have no fertility, it doesn't mean that you can't have a baby. But now it all depends upon the partner. But you can see, sometimes you'll find couples like this. These are the couples that just cannot have children. The next couple of texts that we're going to look at starting next week talk about what to do about it. They give remedies for it. It's some very interesting mystical stuff. But for now, these are the kind of people that you can't help them. But here's another situation. This is often what you find when you deal with people as an astrologer. Something like this. Maybe the male has okay fertility but not great, or maybe the female has okay but not great. And so this couple will also have a very difficult time having children. And by luck or whatever, it may not be going right for several years, and they may be looking at doctors and astrologers for help. So the nice thing about this technique is that you can identify that in this particular case that's on the screen, this man, you have to focus the efforts on the man, improving the semen, the potency and the health in the male. That's the most effective way to concentrate the efforts. Whereas if it's the other way around, something like this, then you can realize, let's not spend too much time talking about the male, how the male can be strong and healthy. Let's focus mostly on the female. That's how I've used this in the past and found it useful. All right. Any questions? To review what he has said. This is a very good technique. Jivendukshita jas putaikya bhavane yugme cha yugmang shake strinang chetre balam vadanti sudadam mishre prayasat phalam bhasvat shukra gurus putaikya bhavane pyojang shake pyojhabe pungsang bija phalam bija balam sutapradam imam mishre to mishram vadet. Some the positions of Jupiter, Moon, and Mars, if the sun falls in a female sign in Amsha, they say a woman has a fertile field. If it's mixed, then producing children requires more significant effort. Some the position of Jupiter, Sun, and Venus, if this sun falls in a male sign in Amsha, they say a man has a fertile seed to give pregnancy. If it is mixed, so is his fertility. Very nice technique. Okay, thank you so much. I see no questions coming up. Teak.